Chapter 8 The Shadow World. I swept back the flap of the doorway to my dream lodge and looked outside at the clouds above. It had been raining, and the clouds were grey-blue. Behind them, a piece of sky peeked through in pink and orange and turquoise blue. The layers of clouds, one upon another, were like the layers of consciousness that I had been traveling. I turned to Agnes, who was still sitting by the fire. I had come out of the dream 30 minutes before, but I was unable to speak. After doing several breathing exercises with Agnes, I had finally been able to move and stand up. Agnes, I said slowly, my voice a little husky. I am still having trouble understanding what this process is that I am doing. I am dreaming, yet I am not asleep. Can you explain that? I looked back at the clouds as they began to shred like thin cotton being pulled apart. We have spoken together of doubling, Agnes replied. Doubling occurs in the physical. You mean when you are in one place and you can appear physically in another place at the same time? That is approximately what I mean, Agnes said. There is no way to explain these things in a rational language because they are, again, part of the shadow world, part of the unknowable. But as closely as I can explain it to you in words, you could be here, and if your intent and your spirit intention were strong enough, you would be able to be here physically with me and still manifest the form of your body somewhere else. It would not be your physical body, but someone could see you and think it was your physical body. Now, what you're doing in the dream lodge here is different, she said. I closed the flap to the dream lodge and went back to sit near Agnes, next to the fire. What do you call what I am doing? I asked. It is called doubling in the dream time or dream walking. You are not exactly just dreaming. You are actually sending your consciousness into a separate time so that you are not moving in the astral but beyond it. You must remember that when you move out of this physical dualistic existence, you are moving away from the reference of the time-space relativity that we experience here. Agnes patted the floor of the dream lodge with the palms of her hands. Sorry. We are moving out of time. That is why when you are working in the astral, it is impossible to tell what time it is. What you are doing when you dream walk, Lynn, is moving into history, into the past. You are exploring your lifeline. When you leave your body, you are going down your cord, which was existed through your many lifetimes and has been created by your spirit connection with the Great Spirit. You mean to tell me that there is an actual cord that leads from each of my lives to the next? Yes, my daughter. It leads from one lifetime to another until it goes full circle. It isn't going from beginning to end, but full circle. Then do we just go on forever in that circle, reliving our lives? You don't exactly relive your lives, you become a dream walker. Physical existence is structured to teach you things through the possibility of mirrors. You create your mirrors during a physical existence in this body that you are. You gather a family, you gather a husband, friends, a teacher like myself, and you learn from us. You learn from the reflection that you see. We are mirrors for you. You choose us. You chose us. You learn as much as you are capable of learning. You have all that you need in this lifetime to become enlightened. Whether that happens or not is really up to you. Everyone has the chance to become enlightened in one lifetime? I asked. Yes, everyone has that opportunity. Everyone has what he or she needs, the mirrors. Each of us has asked before being born for everything needed. The problem is when we are born, we become caught in the dream. We are born into a kind of sleep. To become enlightened is to wake up from that dream. It is not unlike waking up in the dream lodge and finding Catherine gone and me here. I nodded in agreement. I hear your words, Agnes, and I know what you say is true. Somewhere inside me, it resonates true to me. I know it's true, although I have no other memory of actually experiencing different lives. I don't remember my deaths, but I must say that I have a strong sense that my work with you has been a process of remembering. When you talk about doubling, dream walking, power, many times I intuitively know what you are going to say before you say it. When I first met you, little wolf, I told you this. I said that if you became my apprentice, your learning with me would be a process of remembering, and that is true, is it not? Yes, I said. And you know, Agnes, when I am working in this dream, doubling in the dream as Catherine, I remember what has happened to her. I think that if I were put to the task of writing the rest of her story, I would have a pretty good idea of what happens. Yes, Lynn, I imagine that is true. Nevertheless, it is important for you to go through that experience slowly as it is revealed to you, because some of what is going to happen will be painful. Some will be ecstatic. You don't want to rush yourself. The cord is very sensitive. It is not that it is weak or that it is possible to break it, because it cannot be broken. But that hoop of lives is indeed sensitive. Retracting those hoops is not an ordinary movement for any of us. We don't usually do that until we reach the end of our circling. And when I say the end, that is not really the way it is, but it is the only way I can describe it to you. You at some point finish the dance. Then you stand in the center of your circle with your lives around you, and you are no longer dream walking. Having encountered each of these lives, you have the memory of each of them. And then you join the Great Spirit on a higher plane of existence. What happens at that point, Agnes? It is different for each person. Some people join their circle as you have joined the Sisterhood of the Shields, and they go on to do work on higher planes. You may work for many things. You may work for the betterment of the planet that you have spent most of your lives on. You may work on other star levels that you and I here have no knowledge of. It really doesn't matter, because how you evolve really depends on where you go. So, Agnes, part of what I am doing with Catherine is trying to understand my many lives so that I can sit in the center of my circle. Yes, and I will explain much more of that to you later on in this traveling of yours. Is there anything that bothers you now? Anything that you are feeling uncomfortable about? She asked, picking up a piece of grass that lay next to her sage and beginning to chew on it. Her face looked kind and very old, as the flames of the fire reflected on the furrows of her dark brown skin. Her hair was pulled back into a single long braid, and she wore a red shirt with a denim jacket over it, matching her denim skirt. She wore the beaded shield that she had been wearing ever since I met her. It was red and white and had the symbol of the turtle beaded intricately into the design. The turtle represents our Mother Earth, and I thought how much Agnes represented the power of Mother Earth to me. In a sense, she was the source of my power and my happiness. Doubling in the dream time, Agnes went on, is a very tricky matter. What we are doing, Ruby and I, when you are out in that other dimension, is moving along your lifeline to make sure that everything is in order. What could possibly happen to it? I asked, getting a little frightened at the thought. I was thinking in my mind of an airline reaching down a deep sea diver that might snap. As if she read my mind, Agnes started to chuckle. No, Lynn, nothing is going to happen to you. We wouldn't let it. Could anything happen if you were not here? I asked. Not really, because you have come to the point where you know unconsciously when trouble begins. You would snap back into your body as quickly as a rubber band would snap on my finger. But snapping back that way would make you very uncomfortable. I see, I said, still not feeling secure. You have prepared for this journey for 15 years. Your work has made you strong. Your spirit is strong. And more than that, Lynn, there are forces protecting you that you don't even know anything about. And it is better that you do not. There will come a day when you will meet these forces, and then you will understand what all of this really means. You know, Agnes, I have never delved much into past lives. I have never known quite what I felt about that subject, because I felt maybe my past lives were largely a product of my imagination. I know that the imagination is very important in the work of a shaman, but I still didn't fully trust what I saw. I have had glimpses of lives as a native person somewhere in the world and so forth, but I didn't trust those glimpses. For you, Lynn, it is probably better that you do not, but this is something else. Don't you agree? Agnes said. And Yellow Dog, that had been hanging around the cabin for several days, poked his nose in through the flap, his round, alert eyes asking if it was all right for him to enter. Come here, boy, Agnes called to him gently. He came over and lay down beside her and rested his head on her knee. She began to stroke him, playing with his ears. The dog went right to sleep, closing his eyes in complete contentment. Even though I have been back from the last journey for 30 or 40 minutes, Agnes, I'm still very wobbly. I feel that my reactions start to be Catherine's reactions. It's getting difficult to know where my existence begins and hers leaves off. I would say that is normal. I think that if it becomes more pronounced, you should tell me. I think that at this moment you don't have anything to worry about. Your luminous fibers that form your spirit being are very strong. I have moved along them like someone walking in space along a lifeline. They are secure and strong, and you are meant to be doing what you are doing. I would never ask you to do it if it were not important. You will learn things through this previous lifetime that are invaluable to you. It is also important for the people that you work with to know that this is something that is possible, that this is indeed an exercise that strengthens your spirit. There is nothing you do that does not strengthen your spirit. That is what this life is all about, to evolve. So everything you do is an exercise in a way. It exercises the muscle in a sense. If you want to become a good horseback rider, you exercise your muscles so that you can become proficient at that endeavor. This work in other lifetimes is important because it enhances your abilities to travel between the dimensions. Agnes, in my dreaming with Catherine, grandmother talks about the ancient knowledge of Europe that she was a part of the way of Wyrrd, and she talks about where that knowledge came from originally. She talks about the star nations that came. I looked up toward the top of the dream lodge, trying to remember the number of years. It was at least 300,000 years ago, I think. Agnes looked at me with a twinkle in her eye and nodded. Yes, she said, patting the old yellow dog. The star nations brought this extraordinary knowledge onto our planet. It was lost to most people, but it was memorized all over the world by women. Women are the keepers of the ancient knowledge, and we are the keepers of Mother Earth, because we share her energy, because we share her source of power, of goosebumps. Because of our connection with Mother Earth, it is fitting for women to preserve this knowledge. Down through the ages, it has been passed from a woman to her daughter or adopted daughter, her apprentice, and that apprentice then becomes a shaman woman and passes it on, and so forth. In a few places at different times, this knowledge has been written down. It has always been mixed with other knowledge, but basically it has been kept the same for all time. It is very ancient. Many times the hoops of knowledge have been broken, but never has the knowledge been forgotten. Women have kept it in one way or another. We must do great honor to those women, because many of them have suffered enormous hardship, first to learn the knowledge, then to pass it on, all the while trying just to live. Agnes, what happened to the star nations? Did they come and then just leave? Agnes, what happened to the star nations? Did they come and then just leave? No one knows for sure, my daughter. They came from the stars, and to the stars they returned. But we think they have brought back their knowledge from time to time, that they have manifested this knowledge through people who have walked the earth. These people have known where to find wisdom. What do you mean, find wisdom? I asked. The star nations planted wisdom, like seed pods, upon the earth. We spoke of this in Tibet when we went there together, you remember. These seed pods were meant to bloom and bear fruit when the people of the earth were ready for higher knowledge, Agnes said. She looked away, her eyes suddenly very dark and remote. Where are these seed pods? I asked. Many have been found by the great teachers that lived, and many are still dormant. They are somewhere in the river waters, hidden in the rocks of the mountains, or within the roots of the trees somewhere in the world. One day they will all be found, and one day this great Mother Earth will be healed by the wise ones who love her. Agnes looked at me with tears of longing in her eyes and smiled. One day we will truly understand. All religions, I believe, speak of a holy man who has come and walked among them and imparted great knowledge to them. That wise being has always come from the star nations. Some of the animals and the plants have also come from the stars. In the east, the Bedouins talk about the Arabian horse and the Saluki as having come down from the stars, gifts from Allah. I believe that is true. They are the oldest breeds of horse and dog in the world, and they are indeed different. Agnes reached over to my altar and took a little bundle of tied herbs and held it up in the firelight. Here, these are from the star people. What are they, Agnes? I hadn't noticed them. They look different from any of my herbs. These are nettles, and they are used to keep away the darkness, negativity, the dark spirit that may come to harm you. But the dark spirit would not harm me, Agnes, because I won't let it. Who would send me such a thing? You would only send such a thing to yourself, Agnes said with a smile. You remember your lessons well from Nepal, I hope. Yes, Agnes, I do. They were some of the most important lessons I have ever learned. I learned that our fear creates our own negativity. Negativity from other people as a thought form can certainly come into my field, but it's not going to harm me unless I allow it to. I can send it back to the person who sent it to me. Yes, this is true, but there are times when we are weak, Agnes said. There are times when it helps to have our plant friends around us. A dark spirit sees these plants and leaves quickly, Agnes said, putting the bunch of nettles back onto the altar and dusting her hands together. Where do those nettles come from? I asked. They come from Zoila in the south, in the Yucatan and Guatemala. Oh, I said, remembering Zoila and Jose and Jaguar woman with fondness. Agnes's grandmother, in my dreaming with Catherine, the woman who chose her death so that I could become part of the sisterhood? Agnes laughed. I don't know, Lynn. I think that's for her to tell you, and perhaps you can tell me. Agnes, I know that you know. Well, this might surprise you, but I don't know everything, Agnes said, and she got to her feet. The old yellow dog got up and stretched, first one hind leg straight out behind him, then the other. I got up and put out the fire, and we walked out the dream lodge. We said a prayer outside the lodge, smudged it all the way around, and then walked back up the trail toward Agnes's cabin. It was now dark out. We could see the moon poking through the clouds above, leaving shadows of branches and trees on the smooth ground ahead of us. The old yellow dog seemed quite happy that we were heading toward the cabin and dinner time. As the cabin came into view, a plume of smoke left the chimney. It smelled of cedar and my stomach began to growl. I was starving. As if hearing us, Ruby threw open the door of the cabin. Standing with her hands on her hips, she called to us. Well, it's about time. We're starving. If you don't leave us physically, Lynn, you leave us in spirit. Aren't we good enough for you? Ruby, I thought you wanted to get rid of me, I laughed. I went into the cabin and closed the door, and I gasped as I first saw July standing at the kitchen counter. For a moment she looked like my friend Anne in the dream time. My eyes went wide and my jaw dropped. July slowly turned around with a tray of food she was taking to the table in the center of the room. She stopped and looked me in the eyes. She seemed surprised, but a moment later I thought I saw a knowing behind her gaze. And then she cast her eyes down and placed the tray on the table. I glanced at Agnes, who was looking at me intently. I was suddenly frightened. I don't know what it was, perhaps just the surprise. I looked at Agnes questioningly, but she smiled and shook her head as if I should be quiet. So I said nothing. Do you think we could eat tonight without a lot of talk? Ruby asked. Sure, Ruby, but I thought maybe you'd like to hear about my journey. You just love to make me envious of all the wonderful places you get to go to. You always leave me at home. No, thanks. I think I'd just like to eat in peace for once, Ruby said. Before July sat down, she came and gave me a quick hug around the shoulders. Lynn, we've missed you. I would love to hear your story. She sat down and looked at me expectantly. Not now. I think Lynn needs to eat. She's more tired than she knows, Agnes said. With those words, I suddenly realized how exhausted I was. I felt as if I had run back and forth to Ruby's cabin 2 or 3 times. I ate like I had never eaten in my life. Ruby finally sat back and said, "Well, I hope you're going to leave some for us." "Don't worry, Ruby. I'll leave you a bite or two." She pinched me on the cheek with a threatening glare and said, "Yes, I hope you'll leave a bite or two for your old friend Ruby." My stomach did a quick turn. When Ruby looked at me that way with her blind eyes, I knew something was in the air. I didn't know quite what, but I knew that this was going to be a very long night. I had hoped that I would be able to sleep, but as I finished my dinner, a new surge of energy quickened me, and I wanted to talk. I began looking forward to the adventure of the night with Agnes, Ruby, and July. "Oh, talk, talk, talk," Ruby said. "All this seriousness, maybe tonight is a night we can play a little game. How about it, Lynn? Are you up for a game?" I breathed a deep sigh and knew that the butt of this game was probably going to be me. "Okay," I said, "I guess I'm ready for anything." Ruby chortled to herself. I didn't like the sound of that. July and I got up and cleared the table and washed the dishes. Agnes and Ruby were getting two peculiar looking objects wrapped in blankets out from under the bed. They set them out on the table. The two bundles looked identical. I had never seen them before. "Where did those come from?" I asked. "Never you mind," Ruby said. "We get around once in a while too, you know." She sat by the table as July stoked the fire. Agnes got herself settled comfortably and indicated she wanted me to come and sit next to her. "Simon says, 'Touch your nose,'" Agnes said in a loud voice to me. "Simon says you must be kidding," I said to everyone. They were all touching their noses. "You're out," Ruby said, laughing. "Simon says hop on one leg," Agnes demanded as we all hopped on one leg. After an hour of giggling and running around the cabin, I realized why we had played this silly game. By concentrating on what was happening, I had pulled my astral and physical body completely together again. Then Agnes unwrapped two masks from the bundles. One was an old Tlingit spirit mask, which she placed on the back of a chair at the head of my sleeping bag for guidance and strength in my dream walking. The other mask was Wolf. She placed that mask at the foot of my bag to strengthen my power animal and pay her respect. But the time I went to bed, I felt whole and normal, and I rested well. My next dreaming began early the following morning. Chapter 9. Living in Life Force. It had been raining and storming for over a week, so I had not been to see grandmother in all that time. My parents wouldn't let me leave the house. I awoke at dawn on the 14th day, threw open my draperies and looked out at a cloudy sky, but no rain. I was thrilled. I knew that perhaps this afternoon I could go to see her. Finally, after the midday meal, I saddled up my horse and left for the little stone house. I had stuffed a big finger of bread in my pocket for her, but by the time I arrived and I was standing in her living room, the bread had been squashed and turned to mush. Sheepishly, I emptied my pocket out onto the plate on the table. Grandmother came over and gave me a big hug. She was very glad to see me. She stoked the fire, made us something hot to drink, and served me some soup. It was still very cold outside and the wind was blustery, but at least there was no rain. She set two chairs in front of the fire, so that we could put our feet on pillows and be warm. She took out her embroidery and handed some to me, and we sat in silence, watching the fire and doing our needlework. After some time, she looked at me, her eyes twinkling with light reflected from the flames. It is good just to be together, is it not, Catherine? I studied grandmother's face for a moment. She seemed to be saying something more than just her words. Yes, grandmother, being together is very important to me. Grandmother worked steadily on her embroidery, pulling a green thread through a white background. After several minutes, she said, not looking up, it is that state of being that I am talking about. It is that being, that silence, that unspoken closeness that nourishes an important part of you. It is something that I want you to learn about. After several minutes, grandmother knotted the thread, broke it off between her teeth, and set the embroidery in her lap. Catherine, you are very young. Because of that, you are very innocent. You are a wide open, you are as wide open as that pasture out there. Do you know what I mean? I said quietly, running my fingers over the flower designs in my embroidery. I tried to sense inside myself what she was talking about, and I felt the frightened little girl inside me. I looked at grandmother. Yes, I think I know what you mean. Right now I sense that innocent part of myself as frightened as that part of me that does not know how to protect myself. I think what protecting yourself really means, particularly at your age, Catherine, is nourishing that part of you that you think of as I, me. You have difficulty doing that. You give a lot to the world. Do you not? To the people around you, grandmother asked. Yes, I do, but probably not as much as I should be giving. There are times, Catherine, when you have to think just about yourself. There are times when it is not a bad thing to be selfish. There are times when it helps you to be strong. If you are not strong, if you cannot make your way in the world, then you cannot be an example for other women. How do I nourish myself, grandmother? I'm not sure I understand what you mean. Rather than tell you, Catherine, I want you to do something. Sit there and look at me. Keep your eyes open and just look into my eyes. We will sit here for a while. Just do this practice with me and let us see how you feel. The fire crackled almost in response to her words. A cloud passed overhead and the room darkened slightly. I took a deep breath, as did she, and we just sat in quiet peacefulness, looking at each other. It was simple and it was very silent. At one point, grandmother looked at me very intently and smiled. Do not let words get in your way. Just relax and let go, she said. I took another deep breath and we sat in silent communion, like two old friends sitting in a garden. At first, I felt nervous. I wanted to talk. I was embarrassed. I felt shy. And then my heart began to open. And after many minutes, I was bathed in a feeling of expansive love for this friend of mine, my new friend who was giving me so much. I felt blessed, and instead of trying to radiate that feeling to her, I sat inside that feeling and I wrapped a feeling of beingness around me like a cocoon, a soft, luminous egg of comfortable feeling. After some time, grandmother shifted a bit in her chair. She smiled broadly and winked at me. There, you see, that was not so bad now, was it? Well, I don't know, grandmother. It was a beautiful feeling. I want you to understand, Catherine, what that feeling truly is. Do you sense how that feeling nourished the I-ness within you, your feeling of self? Do you not feel that you gave a special meal, a special nurturing to that sense of I within you? I considered it for a minute, then nodded my head. Yes, grandmother, I really do. I feel nourished as if I had just eaten a big piece of honey cake. I feel better. Yes, I understand what you are saying. My child, when you are feeling lonely at home and you cannot come to see me, if it is raining or it is storming or your parents have things for you to do, move into that still place inside yourself, just quietly. There is no mystery. Let your heart open. Let the whole room be filled with nourishing light from your heart. Do you understand, Catherine? Now, let us have some buttermilk, she said. I jumped up and added small branches to the fire, then came back to grandmother with 2 cups of buttermilk. We sipped our buttermilk and went on with our needlework. All of a sudden, grandmother jumped. Ouch, she said. What happened, grandmother? Oh, I just pricked my finger with my needle. She held up her finger. There was a drop of blood on the end of it. She cocked her head to one side, sucked the end of her finger, and then touched the point of the needle with a finger of her other hand. This needle point is a bringer of truth. Come over here a minute, Catherine. Touch the end of this needle. I went over to stand next to her and gingerly touched the point of the needle, not wanting to prick myself as well. She said, touch it just hard enough to cause a little bit of pain. I did so. Ow, I said as I accidentally pricked myself. Now I too was bleeding. Now we can be true sisters, I said. Well, yes, Catherine, that is not a bad idea. We are now of common blood. She touched her finger to mine and gave me a kiss on the forehead. But there is something else I want you to learn, she said. Sit down. When grandmother had something to teach me, her demeanor changed considerably. Instead of being soft and sweet and gentle like anybody's grandmother, she became strong and remote. Her eyes shifted from gentleness to intensity. The change always frightened me a bit, but I realized that when she moved into that place of power within herself, something important was coming through, and I had to pay attention. I moved back to my chair and sat quietly, sucking on my finger. Catherine, have you ever been in pain? Oh, yes, grandmother. Can you remember that pain? Well, yes, as a matter of fact, I feel it in my finger right now. This hurts, I said. Take the needle, she said. I picked up the needle and held it in front of me. Now, look at the needle. Look at the point of it. Describe it to me. Well, it is pointed, it's sharp, it shines in the light, it reminds me of being at the center. Good, Catherine. Now, as the needle has a pointedness to it, a centeredness to it somehow, I want you to go inside yourself. Close your eyes. I did as I was told. Close your eyes and move your consciousness into your finger. I did so. It was not hard because my finger was now throbbing. I moved my consciousness down into my finger, and then she said to me, I want you to try to feel your life force. Are you pulling it in, or are you pushing it out, or are you just sitting with it? I thought for several minutes. I think I am pulling my life force in. It is as if I want to pull the force away from the hurt. Good. Now, Catherine, I want you to do the opposite. I want you to push the life force out through the pain in your finger. Try that for a few minutes." I did that, and as I did it, I felt the pain throb. I felt the throbbing in my finger, that was all. "Just sit with the pain," grandmother said. I did that. I just sat with it. I did not push the energy in or out. "Now, Catherine, I want you to tell me where the pain really is." I took my consciousness and went into the pain, except a strange thing happened. As I moved into the pain moved off to the left, and then off to the right, and then all of a sudden it was not there. It was gone. I could not find it. I started shifting in my chair. Grandmother started to laugh, that wonderful laugh of hers, and I couldn't help but laugh with her. I opened my eyes. "What are you laughing at, grandmother?" "I am laughing at the look on your face," she said. "Well, where did you find the pain?" "Grandmother, there is no pain. There is no more pain. I could not find it." "Ah, is that not interesting? Well, now that the pain is gone, perhaps we can finish our buttermilk." I looked at her. I could not believe what had just happened. I looked down at my finger. The bleeding had stopped and I certainly felt no pain. "But grandmother, every time I have ever pricked my finger, it has hurt for hours. My fingers are very sensitive." "Yes, Catherine," she said with a grin. "What just happened, grandmother?" "You found out something very important." "What was that?" I asked. "You found out that pain is very interesting, and perhaps we think it should exist because we have been hurt, but maybe in fact it is only in our minds." "But grandmother, if I hurt my leg, if I had a cut, it would hurt terribly. Of course there is pain in the world." "Yes, there is pain in the world, but let us just say that there are ways to work with pain." I looked at her for several moments, blinking. Then I remembered. "I do not have any pain. I guess you are right, grandmother. I do not have any pain. I just did that myself, did I not?" "Yes, you did." "Well," I shook my head. It was hard to believe. "You see, Catherine, these are things that are not easy to explain, because if they are explained to us, we do not believe the words we hear. It is very important to experience these things. You have done it and you can do it again." "Yes, grandmother, thank you." The old woman and I sat quietly in front of the fire for some time. My thoughts turned to Anne. "Grandmother, where is Anne?" I asked. "She had to go home to be with her family for a while, but she will be back soon." "She likes you very much, Catherine. I am so glad that the two of you are friends." "Oh, grandmother, so am I. I never thought I would have such a wonderful friend. You have changed my life." The old woman smiled broadly. Her eyes nearly disappeared. She was very pleased. "Yes, Anne is a good girl. She has a very strong self-shield." "Is that different from a spirit shield?" "When I think of a shield, grandmother, I think of the shields that warriors carry when they go into battle. My father has many such shields hanging on the walls." "Well, Catherine, there are outside shields and inside shields. A self-shield is your identity in the physical world. A spirit shield is an inside shield. Some shields we carry in the world to protect us. Some have a coat of arms that tell the world who we are." Ah, persona. "And then there are shields inside, and they protect us also and help us know who we are." "It is almost as if we have many different people inside us. Is that right?" "Yes, it is true. There are many different parts to ourselves, and to become a woman of knowledge, a woman of Wyrrd, you must understand the meaning of all parts of yourself. There is a part of you that is actually just your vitality, your life force. That is why I did that earlier exercise with you, that being in the silence with me, because you are getting to know the part of yourself that is just being or just a quality of living in your life force. Yes, I do not spend enough time there. I wish I had more time to experience that. When you are at home, Catherine, do you spend very much time alone? Yes, I do, but I am always busy. I am always working on my projects, doing my needlework, studying music, or doing whatever my mother wants at that time. And that is my life, I suppose. Let me ask you another question, Catherine. Do you enjoy being as busy as you are? Oh, yes, I like being busy. I find that I like to accomplish things very much. I see. Is that a part of yourself that you are familiar with? I do not understand what you are asking. Well, just as there is a part of you that likes to just be, there is a part of you that likes to do things. Oh, yes, I see what you mean, grandmother. Yes, that is a big part of me. Perhaps the part of you that is always accomplishing things has taken over. The part that just likes to relax in silence, maybe even to the point where the part of you that likes to just be is overshadowed. Is that possible? I fought for some time, squirming in my chair. There was something that felt uncomfortable about what she was asking. Yes, I think that is true. So, what does it mean, grandmother? The important thing is that you experience the difference between these two parts of yourself, my daughter. But also, it is important for you to understand that there is a choice. You have the choice to do too much or just enough. And you also have the choice to just be. That is true, I am sure. But everybody pushes me, you know. Everybody wants me to be busy all the time. As you get older, then, Catherine, you can see the error in that. You can remember the nourishment you get from sitting in the center of your own being. And when you begin to feel hungry inside for time, for space, you can take that time and you will know how to nourish yourself and replenish yourself. Every day, the body needs food and it needs sleep. Your spirit is just the same. The spirit shield that we have spoken of needs to be nourished. For there to be flames, for you to arouse the inner fire, there must be some time, there must be something to burn. For there to be power, there must be life force. So it is important for you to see how to nourish yourself, whether I am around or not. I nodded and realized deep inside me the importance of her words. Your spirit shield can become dented at times, grandmother went on. It happens when people hurt your feelings, when you face difficulties, when you are frightened, when you move out of that silent place inside you. Is there anything I can do? Yes, I will show you. She stood up and indicated for me to do the same. The room was getting even darker now. The firelight danced across her face, making her look very ancient and very regal. She had an extraordinary presence. She looked like the queen of the world. She was a powerful woman hidden away here in this little stone house in the country. I wondered where she had come from, and for a moment I sensed her extraordinary history and the series of events that had brought her to me. And I wondered at the mystery of our meeting. Catherine, extend your arms like this. She held her arms with her palms straight up in front of me. Now, close your eyes and feel gently around you. There will be a misty feeling, a feeling almost of a gentle cloud around you. Take a deep breath and feel this cloud. At first it will be warm, then cool. You will be feeling the light around you. Move your hands around, and you will feel that in front of your heart, your spirit shield has moved very close into your body. In a moment, I want you to move your spirit shield out away from your body, about the length of one of these fire logs, she said. She crushed a few herbal leaves into a green mass and smudged my forehead between my eyes. I peeked at the fire log and saw that it was about to the length of my arm. Now, with your hands, gently, using your imagination, visualize your spirit shield, this golden white light around you, the color of the flames in the sun, and with your palms push your spirit shield out to arm's length, gently and with intent. What do you mean by intent, grandmother? I mean, center your attention around your navel and then push out with your thoughts, and you will begin to actually feel your spirit shield. Now, begin. I centered myself and then I began to push out with my hands. At first, I felt nothing. Finally, I could feel a gentle warmth. As I began to push, it became warmer, as if the activity had warmed the light around me. Slowly I could see. I could sense something burning intensely like a cocoon or a shield of light that enveloped me. Slowly I pushed it out until I felt more comfortable again. The smudge between my eyebrows tingled slightly. Ah, grandmother said, that is good. Now we will sit down and just be together for a while. And then I think it will be time for you to go home, Catherine. I sat down again with grandmother and looked at her. I smiled. Grandmother, I feel so much more calm, yet powerful at the same time. Is that a trick? I suppose you could call it a trick, Catherine, but it is as real as the nose on your sweet face. These are just things that we need to know about. People do not learn these things. They are afraid to become wise. Human beings are afraid to try anything new. It is the tragedy of human life, as we have spoken about before. Even though something new may make us feel better, we are still afraid. Well, I am not afraid, grandmother. I do not understand why everyone else is. I picked up the embroidery and began tying off the threads. Well, child, you are not afraid because your understanding is much deeper. There will be a time, a long while from now, when the world will be happier and a better place to live. Whether you know it or not at this moment, some of that improvement will be because of the work you are doing now. I looked at her, hardly able to believe her, not knowing what to say. I sensed that she meant some time long in the future, but I was not sure. Do not worry at this moment, Catherine. There are many things you will learn in our work together. Now it is important only that you experience these simple things. But even though they appear to be very simple, you are learning truth that will be valuable for a very long time, certainly longer than you know. She leaned forward and brushed the herbs off my forehead. I said nothing and finished the knot that I was working on. Then I glanced toward the window and the gathering